This is a Clouds Weather Alert.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center. We're going to give you special coverage of this Pacific tsunami situation, a very serious one. As we're looking, I know you may be wondering why we're looking at Northern California, and that is because, unfortunately, the tsunami advisory we talked about earlier in the night has been upgraded to a tsunami warning now for some areas of coastal Northern California. So we need to be very mindful here of things that we're talking about down north as well as Humboldt counties here, and especially around the community of Crescent City, California, and down north. They could have a tsunami here around 11:50 Pacific time. That threat will start to really come into play around then. Some of the waves could be upwards of 5 feet, give or take. So need to get to higher ground there around Crescent City, California, as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things. About 2 hours away there as we're watching the situation very, very carefully there in toward parts of California from this 8.8 earthquake. And we were down with earlier on off of Russia. Unfortunately, impacts still are very pronounced here as we're looking at the overall situation. We just have to be very mindful of what's going on. I'm looking at all the different information here in the Weather Center. Even have my phone in front of me because it's such a fluid situation. It's a one-man band here. I want to make sure I get all the information to you guys on this very dangerous scenario, as it's very important to move to higher ground in this type of situation. Again, very serious scenario with the Pacific tsunami threat. We've had a report of the tsunami already. Now, how bad will it be towards some of these U.S. areas? That's the question that we're going to be trying to keep you updated on and answer here over the next couple hours, give or take, depending on how long we need to stick with this. I know can't stick with it forever, but there's a chance this, tsunami threat could last for, maybe a day or so in some of these more vulnerable areas. I mean, we want to go ahead as the threat gets underway. They'll give you the advance notice before, the conditions for really are too dangerous here for a period of time. It's hard to really say because there's a chance, you know, things as they keep getting reevaluated may, downtrend where we get the warnings drop. But where you have an advisory, which is the entire west coast of the U.S., you want to make sure you get away from the beaches. If you have a warning, you need to not just evacuate the beaches, but you need to really treat this like a matter of life and death. I mean, even an advisory, it could be that you don't want to be in the water because of the weird energy here that a tsunami could offer. But if you have a warning here in play, you really need to, make sure that you're taking action here to evacuate from these more vulnerable zones like what you see here in these couple counties, these couple coastal zones within these counties in Northern California. And earlier on, it was an advisory after it was a watch. Now it's a warning, which is more serious. Advisory, maybe 1 foot. That's still bad if you're at the beach. Can mess up lifeguard stands. Now, once you get to a warning, though, going to be, maybe call them boats to come inland even here. And obviously that can be deadly, even though it is nighttime, especially in California here, as we're looking at things. I know Hawaii, not so much. It's only about 6 something out there. So more people potentially could be out and about. But the warning has got out here of this very serious situation. Let's go ahead. I'm checking different sources here. There's a lot going on. Making notes of where we want to go into coverage as we treat this kind of like a hurricane landfall, a storm surge situation in some regards. As I know, there's just so much happening here. As we're tracking things, we're always watching our local area when there's threats. No local threat with this, thankfully, for our 62 counties, but we're in alert mode for this global type of situation. Parts, of the U.S. West Coast under a tsunami warning, those most vulnerable areas because of the way the coast is oriented there, and in Hawaii, also under the tsunami warning. So this is very serious stuff, my friends, as we go ahead and take you to the USGS here earthquake map. What prompted this? One of the top 10 strongest earthquakes ever on record in global history. The recorded data that we have on hand, this 8.8 earthquake there right off of Russia. And you can see it's that blue dot right here. Very, very serious, my friends. As we're looking at things, as we're tracking things here, this is something you don't talk about every day, that is for sure. As you look through the record books, I know going back decades, we had an earthquake in a similar spot that triggered a destructive tsunami here for Hawaii. So that's why there's so much concern there. The warning center there in Honolulu, really concerned. I mean, the Alaska Warning Center, they cover areas in California, and they've been reporting about Alaska, some spots too. Those are a little more vulnerable to this threat over the years anyway. But California, not as often, more rare, more population, and more concern, obviously, as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things with this Pacific tsunami situation, this 8.8 earthquake here. As we were looking at things earlier on, that was around 7:25 Eastern, 4:25 Pacific, which would be about 1:25 Hawaii time. So that's that blue dot right here. Now you see where Hawaii is. There's been an earthquake around there, but all that energy trying to come toward them here. There's Hawaii, where this orange dot is there. Now they have, different mountain ranges and the like here, and then you can kind of get the idea as we're looking in the Pacific of this type of situation. They can have earthquakes of their own down there, volcanic things that can happen and the like, but not really to the level we had up there by Russia, a very destructive earthquake. Hopefully, they don't have anything like what they had in Japan in 2011 with that tsunami that kills thousands and thousands of folks there. You always think of that Fukushima there, nuclear plant in Japan in 2011, and they had tsunami alerts out in the Pacific from that. We had the 2004 Indonesian tsunami situation that was so catastrophic around Christmas time. So we just have to be very mindful here of what's going on as we're tracking things. This Pacific tsunami again. This is what triggered it. There has been a confirmed tsunami. We just don't know how bad it'll be. Right now it's looking like worst case for Hawaii would be, as of this moment, this could change. It'll be about 10 feet high. And for that one vulnerable area in California, about 5 feet high. Otherwise, it would probably be, these areas under tsunami advisory only about a foot or so. But even, 5 feet is a problem. Even a 1 foot is a problem because we talk about flash flood warnings all the time around here. Only 6 inches of flowing water can knock you down here. So, a foot of flowing water, San Francisco, that could still be a problem here as we're looking at things, if you're on the immediate beach there. So again, if you're in Crescent City, California, that area right there, the way it's oriented causes an enhanced concern. Let me go ahead and jump back to this map. I'll kind of zoom in here a little bit more as we look at things and as we track them. I changed some colors because I was having trouble seeing the differences in alerts myself. See, the thunderstorm on a rare one there in Oregon right now, which is kind of interesting, but we're focused on the tsunami threat. The tsunami warning, it stops as you get toward Oregon. There's an advisory up there, but the warning, we're really concerned because of the way this is kind of reminiscent of Cedar Key in our area. If, not that it's really something that we'd ever expect, but if we had Cedar Key get impacted in our viewing circle from a tsunami, kind of like a storm surge over the years, which we've seen so bad, that area is more vulnerable because it's like a catcher's mitt here, so it's able to, unfortunately, it causes enhancement here in the water levels, makes them worse here, makes the impact even greater toward this area. So, again, you got to take this very seriously there. Let me go ahead. And I want to get some things up on Hawaii, though, because they're, even in a more imminent situation in terms of the timeline here. And toward Hawaii, time is running very short there in Hawaii, in those areas there. So we need to kind of switch our situation, switch gears a little bit as we look out there for a bit. I know it wasn't coming from one of my systems, the alert, but it's still there. That's why I can't pull it up on the one source behind me, but I can just go ahead. Let's just go ahead and pull it up here with the map of Hawaii so we can emphasize this because time's running out there. Less than 30 minutes maybe from the tsunami coming in on Hawaii, the first impacts here. So you got to move to higher ground right now there in these areas that are most vulnerable in Hawaii. Again, the tsunami's coming on in. This is a very serious situation for Hawaii. Those tourists are not used to it, obviously. I mean, nobody even there, has it all that often. But, this is a high time of year in terms of the number of tourists being around. And folks got to take this seriously and get away from those more vulnerable areas in the toward parts of Hawaii right now. As again, this is very fluid here, a very fluid situation. Let me see if I can pull up the statement from the office there. Now, one thing about being off camera, we were earlier on, is honestly a little easier when we have a situation like this. But I wanted to be in front of the camera to just, show you guys how serious this is and how serious we're taking this here, and that we had time to, to get in front of the camera. It was time, for them there to make their preparations, get the boats away from the water if they could, but get yourself away from the water more so as we're tracking things here. When we're off camera, we're able to kind of click on things sometimes a little bit easier because the computer's right in front of me. But let me go ahead and, I know they're saying 8.7 in here again, so, that number's kind of fluctuated, but other sources said 8.8 with the earthquake there. So again, just continue to track things here. Continuing to give you guys the very latest. Let me go ahead and put this behind me. So this is the information here from the Honolulu Pacific Tsunami Warning Center. The tsunami hidden, potentially here pretty soon. Some measurements here in the ocean, some different, buoys and the gauges here and the like. You see there was one that measured up to 3 feet, it looks like there. But we could have something worse than that here potentially by around 7:17 Hawaii time. It is 6:52 Hawaii time right now, so 25 minutes from the first tsunami wave potentially coming in, and these tsunamis could wrap around the island. As it says on the screen here, a tsunami is a series of long ocean waves. Above that it talks about how this could cause damage along the coastlines of all islands in the state of Hawaii. Urgent actions to be taken to protect lives and property. So, each individual wave, they'll 5 to 15 minutes or more and extensively can flood coastal areas. As we're looking at things, I know the west coast of the U.S., if you're under an advisory for tsunami, kind of like a coastal flood warning type situation, coastal flood advisory, but when you have a tsunami warning, that's like a storm surge warning when you have a hurricane, or even something worse than that, really, in some ways, as we're looking, depending on, and that is a little, in some cases, depending on if you have a close earthquake, a lot less time to prepare, a little less time to repair. We've had a few hours to notice, but time is running out. There's only 20, 25 minutes there. I would, why did we expect it, the time 7:17, obviously it could be a few minutes off. It's a forecast, so you need to take action now. And the recommendation by local officials and media there, get to that 4th floor of a high rise if you're right at the coast. That should, can't guarantee it. I mean, you never know in these emergency situations, but that should, be something where, you're in a better spot here from the waves coming in. You should be high enough up if you're on the 4th floor or higher, even at the immediate coast, assuming we don't have something like they had in Japan in 2011, which was just, so high. I mean, but if it's 10 feet, then, 4th floor, you should be in an okay spot, assuming you don't lose the structural integrity of the building on the bottom. Then, obviously, it wasn't a tsunami, but we saw what happened with the condo who collapsed there in South Florida a few years ago. So, you can't guarantee that'll work out, but hopefully that'll work out in that type of situation, as time is running out here at this point. But you really got to be taking this seriously. All shores are at risk no matter which direction they face. The travel of a tsunami wave may temporarily expose the seafloor, but the area will quickly flood again. Extremely strong and unusual nearshore currents can accompany a tsunami. Debris picked up and carried by a tsunami amplifies its destructive power. Simultaneous high tide or high surf can significantly increase the hazard. And we do have a hurricane in the vicinity. I don't know, Hawaii News Now, KDMB, 9 there. I don't, haven't independently verified this, but they were saying high tide about this time. In some of these more vulnerable areas, I'm not 100% sure. Maybe they're from Honolulu and Oahu there, but the point is we could have high tide and a, hurricane and a tropical storm as well to the south. All this could make this, it could magnify, even if it's not that bad of a tsunami in terms of the numbers, it could, kind of amplify things and make things worse in terms of the localized impacts. So you got to take it seriously here as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things in this very imminent and very urgent situation for Hawaii right now. So again, time is running out there as we're looking toward Hawaii. Let me go ahead and see what else we might have here. Getting some new updates, possibly. Okay, let's see what else we might have. Okay, nothing new there, but we have so many different sources of information coming on in. Let me see here what else we can kind of pull on up. There's some, concern on some gauges here out in the ocean on social media that we could be, getting signatures here of a destructive tsunami headed toward Hawaii. So you got to take this very seriously. Could end up having, that here up to toward part of Northern California as well. Some people are hoping it's just a glitch. I can't see that because I have to go to the gauges there. I might try to see that at some point here, but that's just, folks on social media that aren't the weather service, but I can see stuff from the official sources here. Bear with me. Okay, we're going to see. I saw some stuff right before I came on from the Hawaii Emergency Management. Okay, they're showing the zones where they think the inundation could happen from a tsunami. And this shows that, this is a good thing to look at because, you might be thinking, I got to evacuate really far. I got to evacuate really far, but when time's running out, at this point, I would just say the areas in the red and yellow are the ones to avoid, assuming you're not able to get up at least 4 stories high. So I'm about to say this here in just a second. I need to kind of get it set up. This is from the Hawaii Emergency Management here, this graphic. So let's zoom in down here. This is where so many folks, tourists will be at and the like. I'll move this over. So if you're in the red or the yellow, the tsunami could come into these areas here momentarily. In Honolulu, other areas too, but I know this is where the population density is highest here. So we got to get folks that, your time's running out. If you just get out of the red or yellow, the idea is, and this is something that's kind of beyond meteorology and the science, but my understanding of this is, I can't guarantee this, but my understanding is, somebody don't get an accident or something, because there have been some accidents according to media on the road. People kind of, in that, a heightened sense here, and kind of amped up, and unfortunately sometimes that does lead, and just an overall heavy traffic lead to accidents. We certainly hope, we haven't seen an indication of this. We don't want anything like what happened in Hurricane Rita in 2005 when people were evacuating, in the wake of Katrina. There was so much, hype, for lack of a better word, from that situation. And, there was concern too. I mean, it ended up in a less popular area. Rita was still bad, but so many folks passed away in evacuating there because of the road. Just shorter evacuation time, obviously. But if you get out of the red or yellow areas here on each map, and you check their Twitter for more, Hawaii, Emergency Management Agency Twitter there for more on these maps. But my point is, if you get out of the red or yellow, you should be okay from the tsunami. You don't have to get all the way to the most inland point or something like that. But if you're out of these red or yellow areas, that's where you need to get out of. So obviously you don't want to be down in here. And then I'll zoom out some, getting in the north part of Oahu as we're looking at things. And you just see some of these areas that are more vulnerable. The coastal inundation from the tsunami, as we're looking at things. So let me go ahead and take it back over to another mode here. This is something we don't have to do very often. And it's very serious. This is about 15 minutes away potentially here. And in those areas in red that I was showing you guys, could be talking about a situation where we could have up to, and I know it's not storm surge, but it's similar. You could have up to 10 feet in terms of that water height. So it'd be over the tops of people's heads here. So that's why it's so urgent. Time is running out here in toward parts of that area to get out here. This is serious stuff toward Honolulu. You saw those areas in red, but even in yellow, there's danger here from the tsunami coming on in potentially as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things. So again, we just got to be very careful. It's not storm surge, but it's similar. And, that water height, if it's 10 feet coming in, only 6 inches of flowing water can knock you down like we talk about in flash flood warnings. This is very serious stuff here, folks. A very serious weather situation, a very serious science, and, global scenario here, unfortunately, as we continue to give you guys the very latest updates. So, I know it doesn't impact our area here directly. I'm sure there's folks in our area that are on vacation there, in Honolulu, trying to enjoy their last little bit of summer maybe. And unfortunately, this is not the way they wanted it to go. Not the way they wanted it to go here. As we continue to give you guys the latest with the Pacific tsunami, a tsunami warning for Hawaii and those areas you saw in that one map. Those are some of the ones that are most vulnerable here. Let me go ahead and see what else we can kind of pull up here. Let's pull up. I'm going to pull up Maui. Of course, they had the terrible fires going back in the timeline. Let's see, guys, where the zones are that are at risk there in Maui County. Bear with me here. Let me just pull it up. I'll pull it up full here so you can maybe see it a little bit. And let me see if the, okay, I need to make sure. I don't want any of the random Twitter comments if there's something inappropriate or something like that to come up. So I need to make sure I just take this full then. Not that they would be, but just want to make sure here. So let me go ahead and pull this on in. So this is the inundation map for Maui here, red or yellow. Get out of there. Once you're out of there, you should be in a safer situation, a safer position and higher ground here based on the elevation levels from the destructive wave action. This is Maui County, so you see it's less, but I know some of the areas are just still probably burned out after what happened with the wildfires. There still may not be, a lot of areas to choose from here. Topography, some of these areas are not, can't live in them, be in them anyway. So the red, the yellow, you need to be out of them. Time's running out here. Matter of minutes. I mean, really, we're up against the deadline now because the time's an estimate. I mean, 15 minutes, it could be 5 minutes off. It could end up being in 10 minutes. We get these wave sequence, acts and, this wave sequence acts and to come on in here. And that would be bad news as we're looking here and as we're tracking things with the tsunami warning. So again, let me go ahead and continue to give you guys the very latest. Again, could have up to 10 feet here, folks. 1 to 3 meters, up to 10 feet. 3 meters, about 10 feet or so. And then that's over the top of people's heads with the tsunami action that could continue the sequence of waves here for a while. This isn't just something where, it's one tidal wave like you see in the movies, but it's also not like storm surge here where, if you have a hurricane that's taking its time coming in, where it's going to build, it's going to be quicker than that, obviously, and then it's going to be something where it could still be, lingering around for a while possibly. But, we don't have that much history over the years with these, so, all weather events are a little different. So just going to have to continue to be very careful, be very vigilant here. But if you're in those zones that are at greatest risk, you got to take action and get to higher ground. So again, let me go ahead and see the map again. I know this didn't have a lot on it. Our alerts weren't coming up on there when I tried a little while ago when they sent out some of these updates. Sometimes the time frames don't. My other source here is showing them for California and the West Coast. Let me see if it's showing them for out there now. I certainly would say that if it was on our other source, but nonetheless, coastal areas, you want to get inland, you want to get to higher ground here in Hawaii as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things here. It's a very serious situation. Okay, let's see traffic cameras. I'm going to try to start pulling some of those up. I mean, we got to watch out if, the waves are strong enough, it could cause some power outages there as well with the, power poles falling and the like here in the most vulnerable zones, right? The immediate coastline, something like that. So again, let's go ahead and continue to give you the latest. I'm just going to try to pull some things up here. Let me see if there's any questions or comments from any of the viewers at home. We're live on all the different platforms here. Keep you guys informed. Again, a very imminent situation, obviously, for parts of Hawaii. And we're looking at things and as we're tracking things, just bear with me. Just trying to check some things here. Trying to get an idea of what's going on, obviously. This is very fluid stuff. Some of these are not video feeds. I was hoping we'd get a video feed maybe. The pictures aren't going to do it justice. Let me see if there's some video feeds I can get to. Looking at this earlier on. Let me just try here a little bit more. It's really hard to do on the fly here. At least some of the roads look to be a little bit, not a lot clearer now as the situation does continue to, potentially worsen. Not near as familiar with their camera system, obviously, the sources we have around here. They're just going to be still images. I don't think we want to take them because they're going to be, a little bit behind if nothing else. So there's a lot of folks trying to get on this site right now too. A lot of heightened demand because of the tsunami danger, obviously. Well, hopefully some of this stuff's a little behind. So I'm seeing some, enhanced traffic in some spots. Just gotta hope the water doesn't get this far. As a last resort, you have to get out of your car and really just run for higher ground, but hope that doesn't, come to that. Doesn't come to that point. I mean, because you see trees, you don't want to be. I mean, I think about no fires there and the problems people had having to jump in the water. We don't want people to have to just jump up into the trees and climb them, because that would be really dire. But we'll see the still image. This is from the Honolulu.gov source here. This is north of, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but EWA Beach there. Ewa Beach, maybe. As we're looking, and you see the traffic back up just the one direction. I don't know. Hopefully it's a little behind, more than just a few minutes, and by now maybe hopefully people are in a safer spot, but I don't know. That's not good, just one direction. They don't have the contraflow like, they would have sometimes in hurricane evacuations in the mainland U.S. So you could use this side and go the same way. That would speed up evacuations. So again, this is a still image. Let me see if I can refresh it, because if I can, then that means it's still pretty current here as we're looking. I'm not really getting a refresh on that as we're looking at things and as we're tracking, but just trying to give you guys the latest here on the situation. Very fluid one for sure. Just want to get out of these more vulnerable coastal areas that we've talked about. Of course, we're concerned about California as well. Yeah, unfortunately, our alerts are not showing up for Hawaii. They are showing up, on our map. There are alerts in place. Just the system didn't want to pull them in, but we do have them in California here on the map. A part of, Northern California under the warning advisory for other areas of tsunami around Crescent City, California, expected to arrive. It could be destructive up to 5 feet or so around 2:50 Eastern, which is 11:50 Pacific time. As we're looking at things and as we're tracking things there. So just a nasty situation obviously here as we're looking here at things. Let me go ahead and pull some other information up. Bear with me here. I'm just checking here some of the different sources we have on hand. Just throw this up here on the screen. Update from around 9:26 Pacific, 12:26 a.m. Eastern. Tsunami warning remains in effect for the coastal areas of California from Cape Mendocino, California to the Oregon, California border. So if you're looking in this coastal area, move inland to higher ground. Tsunami warnings mean that a tsunami with significant inundation is possible or is already occurring. Tsunamis are a series of waves dangerous many hours after initial arrival time, and the first wave may not be the largest. So the 8.8 earthquake, Crescent City, California, several feet in a day is impossible there on 11:50 Pacific time. So this is very serious. And by the way, if you're, a local viewer, if you're wanting full weather update, we're not going to have that tonight because we're focused on it. We're putting all our resources into this global threat here, this West Coast, this, Hawaii threat here, some of Alaska as well. A dangerous tsunami situation, but hot weather is going to continue. Storm chances still a possibility in the days ahead. So again, a tsunami warning though out toward California, in Northern California, just a couple counties there, advisory the rest of the West Coast, but then as you get out there toward parts there of Hawaii, that threat, the timeline is getting, very short, really almost no time left to evacuate here. It's really becoming, potentially if the tsunami is actually happening, it could be coming right now, but in this moment, a dire scenario for those folks. So again, we're just trying to give you guys the very latest here. It's just a one-man band, but we have a tsunami warning situation here. And we had a tsunami warning last December, didn't we verify? We had one in 2011 for areas, tsunami alert for the West Coast. We had tsunami warning, I believe, for Hawaii. It's high school back then, so I'm trying to think back the best I can on what happened there. But I know in Japan it was so catastrophic, thousands and thousands of lives were lost there. I want to avoid that there in Hawaii. That's where the greatest danger is, but we're still really concerned about Northern California. Some concern for the rest of the West Coast, but not as dire. More about just getting off the beaches there, of course. So let me check here. Let's see what else I can pull up. Check Guam, check part of Alaska here. Southern parts of Guam under a tsunami advisory. And then, let's see here, parts of Alaska. Parts of Alaska here. Let me go ahead and check their information. There's still a tsunami warning for a little bit of Alaska. Let me pull up the big map here. It's kind of hard to see stuff on, so that's why I haven't gone to it as much. But it kind of is a global map from tsunami.gov that we can kind of use here to kind of help you guys out. So here you go from tsunami.gov. You see where we had the earthquake at up in here. And then you see a tsunami warning, a little bit of Alaska, less populated in general. Then you see a tsunami warning for Hawaii areas there. And then it's hard to make out, there's a lot of orange color showing up West Coast. But within that, there's a little bit of red. That's the tsunami warning for parts of California here. And again, 11:50 Pacific, 2:50 a.m. Eastern time is when that's supposed to take hold there on Crescent City there in parts of California. So not good news. Other areas there, in that zone could be impacted there, Eureka area, but the worst will be around Crescent City, California there. Is based on just the topography, the way the water will funnel in on them, potentially, the docks. We're talking about the harbor type of geography could be damaged or destroyed out that way as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things here, boats and stuff that could be piling up there. Those could be piling up there around Honolulu and the like as we're talking to you right now. I know we're getting all this information on in. Let me go ahead and keep checking things. Gonna see if we're getting any reports of the tsunami in Hawaii according to some media yet. Because it's almost that time. And let's go back to the Hawaii map, Honolulu. Let me go ahead and jump on over to our other source. Bear with me here. Very, very fluid. I want to check social media here. Because, I don't have anybody like, if you would have a TV network, I'm here telling me that there's, like video of it confirmed in Hawaii, but it's going to be coming in, literally we're 2 minutes out from the waves according to the statement from the Pacific, and I know there's a couple different ones. The Tsunami Warning Center in Honolulu, those in charge out there. I know there's one up in Alaska that does things for parts there, you know, the U.S. West Coast, including areas under that one in Northern California. But again, just continue to track things. Again, time running out. I know it's crazy there that. Okay, first off, let's say real quick, Anchorage office just said they are getting some tsunami indications in Alaska. Let me pull that in. Very, very fluid scenario, obviously. There's a hurricane to the south, tropical storm to the south. We could say that too on satellite for a while, but let's go to Alaska. We've got some imminent information here. This is from the Anchorage office. I know it's a little hard to read, but tsunami of an inch, or excuse me, a foot or two. It's looking like, I mean, right now, but the highest numbers I'm seeing about 1 foot, 1.1 feet there. It's actually in Japan, some of these spots. So Alaska, the Atka area, 1 foot, 8 aft, just a little under. So it's not overwhelming. Only 6 inches of flowing water can knock it down. This has been observed there, but you know, it could be up to 10 feet in Hawaii based on the warning that we have in place. So no changes to the alerts as of a few minutes ago from the National Weather Service and Anchorage there as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things. So that's a storyline there as we're looking at this scenario. We'll go ahead and keep going through here on social media. Of course, Hawaii's time is 17 after the hour, and we have a tsunami coming in on them right now. Not good news, obviously. You know, 40's very, you know, populated areas here. Hopefully, folks have taken action because it may now be too late. As we're looking at things, as we're tracking them here. Let me see if I can find anything on another source. And the sun going down out of there, which makes things even scarier. Again, trying to get the latest in. Social media sources saying some of the water was receding there, which is a problem. And there's reports of the tsunami further to the north in the overall, you know, overall geographic picture. See some information. Anybody asked in Los Angeles? I'm gonna pull this up full here in just a second. Let me see if I probably need to just. Well, that didn't work. Okay, let's try to. Generally don't go to this many sources like this when we're in front of the key wall, but this is the way we need to do it here because the, you know, everything's rapidly evolving. I can't just put graphics together and then, you know, a few minutes later everything changes. It just wouldn't work very well in that situation. So let me go ahead. We'll pull this is from the Weather Service in Los Angeles. Let me go ahead and go over this with you guys here. Tsunami advisory there in effect. Harbors, beaches, low elevation, coastal roads, and areas that are prone to coastal flooding. Surges of seawater in and out of the harbor. The water level fluctuating. Dangerous currents and waves possible. So again, this is very imminent. Let me take the logo off for a sec so you guys can read all this. Or at least most of it. I know I'm in the way of some of it, but I'll step over a little bit here. And there's our other logo. We had to stay in alert mode because of things, you know, being so serious, you know, with the tsunami threat. We're going to be able to get out of alert mode. The heat threat starting to subside locally, and now this national threat, you know, global threat here being such a big problem. So you can see, looking there, the threat till further notice. After midnight tonight, Pacific, lasting into Wednesday there, Los Angeles, you know, Santa Monica Pier, and the like. Gonna be watching that area. The water rises shouldn't be near as bad there. It's an advisory, not a warning, but the water, you know, rip. This is like we have locally here, you know, really bad rip current risk, maybe a nor'easter or something. When you're under the tsunami advisory, somewhat comparable, not the exact same, but somewhat comparable. Okay, so let's go ahead and get back on over here towards some of the other information. Let me see if I can pull up some other details here. Again, the graphic I showed is from NWS Los Angeles. Some social media reports that people, maybe still run the water. We sure hope not. Sure hope not. Just checking things here. If you're watching me in your car right now and unfortunately tsunami comes in on you, I mean, that's really not good, but it's a situation you just want to try to get as high as possible here to get away from these waves that are coming on in. It seems like it could be a very real situation for these people out here. I want you to take this seriously. Let me figure out what graphic I can pull in here. I want to pull in something real quick. Let me see what I can do. I need to do something here behind the scenes so I can pull up some inundation numbers like storm surge. I don't have it where I can click on it here. So let me go ahead. We're just going to step out of the key wall. We haven't had to do this in a while. This is like tropical cyclone type stuff on for hours and hours. But let me go ahead, and we might end up being on for a while here tonight. I'm going to go ahead and see what we have. This is very serious stuff, folks. Unlike with the wildfires there, at least there has been some warning, but it seems like, not everybody might have been or might be able to get out of harm's way still. It's about getting as high as you can at this point if you're still stuck in traffic, if that is the case. Unconfirmed reports of that. It's not good if they're right at the water. Let me go ahead and see what I can find here. I want to pull up these gauges. I'm seeing other folks taking the numbers and can't just take it from their Twitter or something. I gotta actually pull up the gauges and it'll be more, real time anyway. So let me go ahead and try to do that. I think this is the gauge everybody was concerned about. That is not good. What was going on just to the northwest of Hawaii, if that is indeed accurate and not some type of data glitch. So I'm gonna go ahead and see what we might have here. I'm gonna go ahead and, of course, the northwest of Hawaii, Midway Islands, Sand Island, Midway Islands there, we had a big spike. I mean, it still might not be, in the grand scheme of things, as bad as it looks in a way, but it's hard to say on the fly in real time. Of course, this isn't impacting our area, that's the good news, but this is something that's such a big story. That's what we got to be on, and we're not going to have our full update tonight. We're in tsunami coverage here. Florida, Pacific, Central Pacific, Eastern Pacific, and the like. So I got this in front of me now, the tides and currents information. See that, obviously tsunami, maybe not, that's not overwhelming, but that's significant enough to be, pretty noteworthy in the graph here. This is just northwest of Honolulu here as we were looking at things and as we were tracking things here. That's not from that long ago. This water coming on in there. And we'll kind of go ahead and move to the south and east there. So that's where that was reported at up here. And here's the Hawaiian Islands. I guess it'd probably be more northwest first. You can see somewhat of a rise. Don't know exactly, if it's all from this or not, but you see northwestern parts of the Hawaiian Islands. It seems like the water level is going up some. We'll see if we start to have a peak here to have some of that flooding or how bad that gets here. Assuming based on everything we've seen, we're going to have a tsunami. We just want to have a situation where maybe it's a 1 foot or 2 feet situation. It still could be deadly, flowing water can knock you down. That's a lot different than, 6 feet where it's over your head. I mean, something like that. 1 or 2 feet still going to cause some damage, but 6 feet's a lot worse. And hopefully we can avoid that, but there's no way to know here for sure. And even if you get that first onset, the other subsequent wave sequences could be even worse, higher is what I'm saying. We shall see. So, until they cancel that tsunami warning, you got to treat this very seriously. Even if there's an advisory after that, you got to take things here pretty seriously as well. So, again, we're trying to follow on all the different sources here. We're looking at this live here on the air, the different numbers. Let me go ahead and go to some of the other sources here. In terms of the gauge data, further down toward the south and east. So that looks like a rise there up toward Pearl Harbor and Hawaii there. As you're looking at things, as you're tracking. I know I don't normally do this, but it's so fluid here. This isn't a situation where it's a set one. I'm gonna look at my phone because there's some information I can ascertain from that. Right here, some of the data on social media. I can leave this up on the screen for you guys. So again, we're continuing to track things here, continuing to monitor them. I know, just looking at everything here, because, I can get real-time reports this way. And there's a concern about the water receding, but then rising, and that's a problem. So we're looking there toward Hawaii. Again, still looking at things that are low in the air. Again, please, I know social media reporting people waiting on the beach for a tsunami. Do not do that. That is the worst place you could be, other than, maybe right there in just having your feet in the water. But you don't want to do that in Hawaii for sure, because you're asking for trouble. I mean, you're like standing out there. I mean, at least like thunderstorm where there's lightning all over the place, but it might even be worse than that, really, in the level of danger you could be in. I know one of the big dangers and one of the big worries here in the country, as we look ahead, one day is up in the like western parts of Oregon. There is the thought of an earthquake just off the coast. I see people still having trouble evacuating with hours, and now they don't have the hours anymore in Hawaii, but they had hours to get out. And some folks still right there at the beach. Now, if you have an earthquake right off of Oregon or something that could generate a bad tsunami, there literally might only be 5 or 10 minutes to evacuate. So that's the thing. We're having trouble with 4 hours or whatever to evacuate. 5 or 10 minutes to evacuate could be a case one day. And I don't even want to know what it's gonna be like what you had in Texas there with the floods. Even though we did have forewarning in some ways with that last part there. As we're looking there and toward the timeline of that period there in early July. I feel like it seems like at this point we're still in late July. I was gonna say last month, but no. I mean, honestly, as a meteorologist, you can't forget about it. You want to forget about it because there's just so many people lost their lives there toward that area there toward that Camp Mystic region. It's so tragic. And at least here we have warning, what I mean by that, there was warnings. We've talked about this, meteorologically across the country for hours about evacuating here. So that's the good thing. Had an advance notice for folks there was the concern, but it wasn't the wording of tsunami coming or something, even though tsunami like wave, type of water heights there for sure. As we were looking toward Camp Mystic there toward the Texas Hill Country earlier this month. So again, as we're looking at things, tracking things, people have had time to get out. And you just gotta hope that they were able to, take heed from this. Because some tsunamis can be much worse. I got about 10 feet. Some tsunamis have been much, much higher than that in meteorological history. I mean, it depends. Tsunami, worse than that, obviously, with those numbers. And the one out toward parts of Indonesia there in '04, those numbers just astronomical. And, even a 10-foot one, even 1 feet can be deadly, but, that could be a lot worse than what we are expecting here, even in terms of tsunamis here meteorologically. So again, let me go ahead and see what else I can pull up here. Bear with me. I know we're gonna go ahead and I'll step out of the wall again because there's just so much going on. It's such a fluid situation. Let me go ahead and go back on over to some other sources there. There's Hawaii. Let's check some more things here. And I just want to get a height on these, Japan tsunami height, just to kind of give you perspective. Yeah, it's up to 131 feet. That wasn't that much bigger of an earthquake, but a lot of different factors play a role here. 10 feet is possible. That was 131 feet in one spot, at least, in Japan, according to what I'm looking at here on first glance. And the Indonesia tsunami, and both of these, Indonesia and Japan, both killed thousands, tens of thousands, really. The height of the Indonesian tsunami at first glance here, that was upwards of 167 feet. So 10 feet still really bad, as we've talked about, though, and that's over the top of people's heads, and that can make this deadly. As we, it's not storm surge, but it's a similar idea in some ways here. As we're looking at things, you see it's over the top of people's heads here, the demonstration on that. So. Continuing to give you the latest here. Getting some new updates. Tsunami warning still for parts of California. Advisory for some other areas in there. The Aleutian Islands and Alaska as well under a tsunami warning. Again, the reason I'm showing you storm surge graphic here is because the number is 10 feet. That's what we could be looking at. Some areas here, 5 feet maybe. As we're looking toward California, which is still over top of some people's head, even the 6 inches of flowing water can knock it down. But that's Crescent City, California, precisely, where they have the tsunami warning there. But 10 feet, maybe, in Hawaii, the highest in scenario. So again, got to take this very seriously. Got to take this very seriously, obviously. The situation does transpire. I'm just going to go ahead and keep looking at things here. Just looking at things behind the scenes, obviously. Again, a very serious situation. And they're not the same thing. You might be wondering though, but can we have tsunamis in North Florida, South Georgia? Not really, though. In 1992, kind of had a situation in Volusia County where they had quick rise of water without really any warning, and that was, a pretty serious situation, even though it was at night on a July 3rd in 1992. I know that was overshadowed by Andrew about a month and a half later, but not, maybe something where we really understood why it happened. Maybe a squall line of storms further to the east triggered it, but it was like a meso tsunami, I think is the terminology. But and generally, we can't have that around here, but that did happen back in 92 down toward the Volusia County coastline. Just, that's just like Daytona Beach area, at least. I'm trying to give you that off the top of my head there. One camera. Let me pull this back up. So the one where we had all the folks on the road a little while ago, it's no longer the case. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up. That's some good news, at least in that one spot. I don't know about other spots, but it looks like folks able to get off the road there. It was a quicker situation, but with the wildfire a couple years ago, so many people struggling to get out in time and losing their life. We don't want to repeat of that in a different type of way this time, but at the same time of year. Certainly don't want that. As we go ahead and continue to give you the latest here, I'm going to try to pull up some more gauge data here. Bear with me. Trying to give you the latest, obviously. Very fluid situation. Just bear with me. Just trying to keep you guys up to date. So much going on, obviously. It is 1:37 a.m. Eastern, 7:37 p.m. Pacific, or 7:37 p.m. Hawaii time there out in Honolulu and the lake, and 10:37 Pacific time in California. We're that west coast there of the state. The northern part of the state is what we're really concerned there for Crescent City area in the Eureka region of California. Trying to keep you up to date here. I'm going to get back to the inundation dashboard, and I'm going to jump back in front of the key wall here momentarily. We'll continue to give you the latest on this very imminent, very serious situation. So many people probably trying to get in that inundation dashboard right now. They're looking toward Hawaii. That danger was expected to begin 20 minutes ago towards some of the different communities there. So serious, obviously. So similar to Storm Surge, not the same, but similarities for sure. Again, trying to get some information here, all the different, tools that we have at our disposal. We're seeing that rise for sure. I mean, it's not overwhelming, but it's clear on this of the gauge. So what, of course, again, this is not impacting our area, which is great news, but there could be tourists out there from our area. And that's, one of the reasons we got to be sticking with this. Such a big deal, obviously, as we're looking at things and as we're tracking them. This is a, worldwide, global story for sure. The 6 inches of flowing water can knock you down. And we're talking about a situation here on this gauge there in northwestern parts of the Hawaiian Islands. You see that rise there. You see that rise here. As we're tracking things, some of these observed values, see that sticking on up there, and we hope that doesn't keep going up, obviously, because, you see that number, that's probably a half foot or so, maybe a little bit more than that of a rise. The 6 inches of water can knock you down, flowing water, and we have that. This type of water can knock people down. Folks are still right on the beach or something. This type of water, even 6 inches, can be deadly. This isn't, 100 feet, like we talked about, give or take. Another big tsunamis, the Japan one, the Indonesian one there, 2011, 2004, but this is still problematic, obviously. We're looking at the gauge here, and toward the northwestern Hawaiian Island zone there, the chain, and you do see that jump. You see that jump here, and you have minor flooding up here, but even this is, a rise. I mean, probably just keep on going up here as we look at this gauge, as we keep on monitoring the situation, as we keep, tracking things. Look at some of the gauges a little bit further south here. You see some of that at Pearl Harbor looked like it went up and then kind of went back down for now. That'd be great if we don't see more rises, but you just never know in the situation. The sequence expected, not to be something that's just a one and done here. This could be something where we get higher tsunami waves here, in the period ahead. See some of this at Honolulu as well. Maybe not as pronounced yet, but don't lay your guard down. And then as you see here up there toward some more spots here, you see that jump. Some of these gauges. Let's get down here further south. You see some of this getting close to minor flooding there. In the Big Island. You see some of this jump here too. Get near Hilo. See a jump here as well. Not overwhelming, but enough. Flowing water 6 inches can knock it down. If it transferred, it's to still be as much as 10 feet of flowing water, though. That is the concern. Maybe 5 feet in California in that one area. Other areas foot or less generally. But Crescent City, California, maybe 5 feet of flowing water and that could impact harbors. That could impact boats. Obviously, that could impact people. And this could be deadly. So, gotta take it seriously here. As a tsunami warning for the Hawaiian zones, that are at the coast. And then as we're looking toward parts of the coast of Northern California, a couple counties really at the coastal zones. Under this is an advisory in other spots, of the West Coast. There's also a tsunami warning there and a little bit of Alaska, as I talked about there. Believe that, we've been talking about a lot tonight. I want to say my geography maybe off. I want to say the Aleutian Islands there in Alaska. As we're tracking things, as we're monitoring the situation, I know we're just going to keep on tracking things here for sure. I know. Let's go up on the map here. This is stuff we're not used to talking about. I know they've had some concern up here in Alaska, obviously. See Atka there. You see some of these tsunami about a foot or so is what we had measured. It was talked about in a statement there from the Weather Service. So again, some of the different, warning agencies there and the like. So again, just trying to give you guys the very latest here on the situation. Just checking more details here as we're live on the fly here. I know I don't normally take my phone in the air, but we just have to give you guys the latest somehow, some way here. Because of what we're dealing with. And that is the Aleutian Islands, by the way, in Alaska, as we're talking about that. As we continue to give you guys the very latest here. Just checking different sources. You gotta be really careful because this isn't something that's a one and done. Could last for, multiple hours. And we're live with you right now. Trying to give you guys the very latest in this very urgent situation. It is 1:44 a.m. Eastern, 10:44 p.m. Pacific, 7:44 p.m. Hawaii time. I'm meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center. We're in North Central Florida, in the continental U.S., but we're tracking situations, West Coast of the U.S., other spots here as well. This tsunami danger. This is Alaska I was looking at. Let's get back down. That's the Aleutian Islands, that tsunami threat there, but let's go back down to Hawaii and look at some of these gauges here again. As we continue to give you guys the latest, you see that jump here, obviously, and I'll move this out of the way so you can kind of see what we're dealing with here, obviously. As we continue to give you guys the very latest, you see that big jump there, though, and even the 6 inches of flowing water can knock you down. So, guys, this is like, at this point, I mean, this is, it could end up being a lot worse than this eventually, but right now it's like a flash flood warning for all these coastal zones, pretty much, which is still bad enough. But this could end up getting a lot worse potentially. As we're looking and as we're tracking things here on these different gauges, as we give you guys the very latest here on what's going on. So, again, trying to get away from these coastal zones, obviously, with the tsunami warning that is in effect here. Something we don't see very often as we look at the situation. I know, again, this is not impacting our area, directly. We could have, we always watch our 62 counties. We hope we never have anything around here like this. It's a lot less likely, but not impossible, but a lot less likely to have it on our East Coast or Gulf Coast. We deal with storm surges. There's a lot of similarities, but we're always watching our local area. But this is a bigger deal. There's anything in our local area right now, the heat, some storms, still problems. We look ahead, but no formal update here tonight because we're, with this danger, bring up the net here as we're looking out toward parts of Hawaii. So I'm gonna try to make some things bigger for a second. Bear with me. See if I can make this bigger. It may not. Let me try here. I'm gonna try to make this data a little bit easier to read because it's hard for me to read sometimes. It might be hard for you to read, depending on what device you're looking at. Okay, so Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Here you see that had that rise there. Right now it's dropping back, but we could have another rise. Could get higher and higher. We'll see. Don't know for sure. Not exactly like storm surge. Not exactly like high tide and low tide with that, but there's some similarities. Especially if it's a lower end tsunami situation, I would say, or in some ways, not exactly or nor'easter almost, but we shall see. See, the numbers have gone up though as we're tracking things here in the weather center. You see, not overwhelming. They said like 10 feet or something like what we've been forecasting. This is a minuscule amount, really, only half feet or so. Again, maybe 3/4 of a foot, but still 6 inches. Over half foot is what we're dealing with. With 6 inches, is something, but 3/4 of a foot is, let's say, so that'd be 9 inches here. And a situation that flowing water could knock you down. Gotta be careful. Don't be at the beach, obviously, in these type of situations. So, I mean, that shouldn't be something we really have to say too much, but there are some social media reports that people are still at the beach there in these areas. Even when you're just under the advisory, like in parts of Guam and in the rest of the West Coast, other than the area under the warning, we really got to take action. In Northern California, Crescent City, California, it's a situation. It's a situation here where you still shouldn't be on the beach, even under the advisory. Still shouldn't be on the beach, so keep that in mind. Okay, just checking more sources. Let me move away from this. And then we're looking at all of our different data points for sure. I wonder if they went away because sometimes when you zoom in, it messes with some stuff, but they're back. Okay. You see some of these rises here and then dips. See if we got some other stations I can pull up. If there's any others, I don't see them. Go back down here. Let's get to the south a little. See some of this getting close to minor flooding there. For the south of the Big Island, of course. Seeing some jumps as well. Let's get back to the north and west. You see that you could definitely see a tsunami indicator, but it's not overwhelming. It's still an issue. Maybe a foot-ish, somewhere around there. Depending on exactly how they're gonna measure that, I know. Storm surge, some of this stuff about above ground level and the like, but not overwhelming. That one's a little worse toward the Midway Islands. There, it would seem, but definitely had some flood there. But again, continuing to give you guys the latest, continuing to check social media myself here for the very latest on this rapidly evolving situation here. Move this over and I'll just click on one of these to leave it up behind me. You see here the jump and the like. I'm trying to give you the latest. I know not the same, but rip currents around here be an issue on that Wednesday, but not the same by any stretch. I mean, it could have some really tricky energy in the water out there, so there could be rip currents there, but a lot bigger concern around here, just some rip currents toward our local Big Bend beaches and the like, not because of this though, by any stretch, but just checking here for any new updates. It'd be a lot better, 3 feet than 10 feet or 50 feet. But we shall see. Still 3 feet is dangerous, but it's a lot different. As we're looking at things, as we're tracking, some of this can be unpredictable. For sure. As we're live on the air, it's a very fluid situation. The arrival, we're expecting about 30 minutes ago there. You see some of the tsunami action there in Hawaii for sure. Not overwhelming right now though, but definitely some flowing water can knock you down. I know, in a way you hope it's going to be like this, but I mean, in a way you don't, but if we only get like a foot here or 2 feet in a lot of areas, people are going to think this was a false alarm and they did all this for nothing and not take action the next time. We don't want it to be much, but if it's not much, then people are going to have a false sense of security for next time. And one of these days, we could have one of those that's a 90-foot tsunami, or give or take, like what we had in Japan, Indonesia, some worse numbers than that, as we reported earlier on. And then people aren't going to take the next one seriously. But we have tsunami warnings. We have a warning, not just in a value where it's more of a local story. So around here, it'd be a big deal, but we would just kind of let the local folks handle. This is a national world story with tsunami warning, so in play. You got to take things very seriously here, obviously. And even earthquake, one of the strongest top 10 in the history of records here, meteorologically, in science, in Earth, in the data set there that we have on the globe. So, again, just giving you guys the latest here. Just, try to be careful with this because I know as I'm checking, I'm all over the place here, but situation, because I'm already seeing comments, people saying, oh, this isn't going to be that big of a deal because the numbers aren't bad yet, and if they don't end up being bad, that this is overhyped. Well, the thing is, the next one could be something similar looking at first, but it ends up being much taller and much more destructive. We just don't know here at this point. Can't lay your guard down by any stretch. I'm getting worried already about that. We would rather have that worry than the opposite, where you don't really have enough hype for something, and then it ends up, destroying so many people's lives forever. Kind of. I mean, it wasn't. We had warnings, but it wasn't hyped up for that hill country flooding in early parts of July in Texas. So a situation we're going to hype this based on the data and the concern. But if it's a situation here that doesn't verify, then of course there's going to be people pushing back saying, it's just something where we hate, based on the data, based on a warning, we have to kind of hype this as a worst case potentially because we just don't know for sure at this point in time. As we go ahead and keep giving you the latest, I'm just checking some alert maps here. Bear with me. Such an urgent situation. Can't let your guard down even if we're not getting the crazy numbers yet. And just checking all the different sources. Again, it's very serious stuff, obviously. Again, trying to give you the latest here at 1:55 Eastern, 10:55 Pacific, 7:55 Hawaii time. Okay, so let me go ahead and keep checking here some of the information. So we had, you see that surge there. See some of these getting closer to minor flow, but nothing like what a destructive tsunami can do at this point. But don't lay your guard down. This, could, evolve on us. Can't lay your guard down by any stretch. I know there have been a lot of false alarms, not even as, this is a bigger alarm than most, but a lot of false alarms here in the Pacific with tsunami threats, or they don't really verify it as what they could be. This is a bigger alarm. We hope it's a false alarm, but again, that could be something where people then don't pay the next day and that ends up being way worse seriously. So you just never know. It's a give and take here for sure. Since there's a coastal webcam here, let me see if something we can. Is that something we're able to pull up? I don't think we should, because I'm not sure if that's something we can. That's something that's a government source or not that we're able to just pull up here. But again, serious situation for sure as we continue to give you guys the latest, very ongoing, rapidly evolving one. I wish we'd pull up the tsunami alert, but it's more about the tropic stuff. As we give you the latest here, try to give you guys the very latest to keep you guys informed on what's going on. Very serious scenario. So that jump there, not overwhelming, but still a problem for local, residents near the coast. That number kind of jumped there for a harbor area, then it kind of receded some. Took it at more jumps. You see this one going back up again. That's what we were talking about with these tsunamis. Gotta be really, taking heed of these. Let me read something to you from the different agencies here involved. Tsunami warnings mean that a tsunami with significant inundation is possible or is occurring. Tsunamis are a series of waves, dangerous many hours after the initial arrival time, and the first wave may not be the largest. So the tsunami warning, remain in effect for different areas. Take this situation seriously. A tsunami is a series of long ocean waves. Another way to explain this, each individual wave here, as we're looking at things, as we're tracking things, can crest their, when they happen and last 5 to 15 minutes or more and extensively flood coastal areas. And the danger can continue for many hours after the initial wave and subsequent waves arrive. And tsunami wave heights there cannot be predicted. In the first, again, even if it's not the largest, we could have a situation where these waves are efficiently wrapped around islands as all shores are at risk no matter which direction they face. The trough of a tsunami wave may temporarily expose the C4, but the area where we have that happen may quickly flood again. An extremely strong and unusual near-shore currents can accompany a tsunami here, and then debris picked up and carried by a tsunami amplifies its destructive power. Simultaneous high tides or high surf can significantly increase the tsunami hazard. I know we have a tropical storm and a hurricane to the south of this. As we're looking and as we're tracking things here, I know, and we also just have a situation, because of all that, if there's high tide and play, that can also worsen the situation as well. So, again, we have a Pacific tsunami situation, a confirmed tsunami. How bad will it be towards some of these U.S. areas? We don't know the end result. Yeah, we know that it's happening in some areas of Alaska, Hawaii, but we don't know how bad it's going to be. It doesn't seem to be, right now, one of those astronomical ones that we talk about, as something that's historic, but you just never know. That's why you got to take heed here in this type of situation, obviously, as we give you guys the very latest information to protect you, your friends, and your family. So, again, a Pacific tsunami situation here, very serious, obviously, with the potential danger, because, we talk about numbers. I mean, this isn't something we're just making up, and that you can have numbers here that are just extraordinary. The Japan tsunami, for instance, let me give you these numbers here, since, I don't want to just, we're not making these up. I mean, it's Japan tsunami height back in 2011. We had the Fukushima nuclear plant impact in that situation. One area there, 132 feet. Talking about here, about 10 feet worst case in Hawaii, 5 feet that one part of California that's most vulnerable. So, not all tsunamis are the same, but if we ever have 130 feet on the west coast, you don't want to know what's going to happen. I mean, if that, so that's not what we're going to deal with here at this point. We're confident in that, especially for the west coast of the U.S., but It's a situation here that, you got to be prepared always for that worst case scenario. It's 10 feet. If we get 10 feet in Hawaii, that's still probably gonna be deadly for folks. We had a tsunami years ago in Hawaii. Let me look this one up. I know we've had some, ones. But let me see. I think it was the 1940s or 50s. I was in a similar area that triggered to the one in the earthquake we had today. Let's see. It was 46, the Aleutian Island earthquake, 8.6. This was 8.8. And how many people died in that earthquake, situation where it triggered a tsunami for Hawaii? 159 people. So, so on April 1st there of 1946. So my point is, the warning systems were different then. So nobody would have really known what to do right at the coast. They might have just been fascinated by it. But the point is, it's similar to analog is there, but different deaths of the earthquake, different things with the overall pattern can cause different type of impacts there toward the coastal zones. So let me go ahead and see here. Let's see, what else do we have here? Let me see. I know it's moving very fast. It was thought that it was moving 500 miles an hour across the Pacific, which, back then, not having warnings is really concerning. It'd been a lot harder to have warnings back then. I don't know. Maybe they did have some type of warning. I don't know. But, yes, so Big Island apparently got to 55 feet at one point, the level above sea level. And it was, we had something like that here, that'd be horrific. Obviously, the potential was there, a point that when we had a tsunami watch, we didn't know what was going to happen. We had to warn them because it's meeting the threshold, but it's not 55 feet. 10 feet looks to be right now, based on the data, the worst case scenario here. Right now, we haven't really seen a foot, maybe just a little bit more than a foot in Alaska, but we haven't seen much more than a foot here in terms of that water rise. So, again, I just continue to give you guys the very latest here in the wee hours of the morning back east. I'm meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center. Let me go ahead and just keep on looking at things, keep on tracking them here. I just want to make sure I'm giving you guys the latest updates here. So I'm going to keep checking things here on my end. And I don't normally like to use the phone this much to uncover it, if at all, but more in front of the wall. It's so fluid. I got to go ahead and do it. Got to go ahead and do it here. Because there's so many different things. Sometimes we'll do this stuff behind the scenes when we're not on camera, but such an urgent situation. We got to make sure we're on top of it here. So let me go ahead and just keep on looking, keep on tracking things. Very volatile, obviously. We're here for you guys to keep you guys up to date on what is going on. So let me go ahead. It's 2:04 a.m. Eastern, 11:04 out west there in the Pacific. They have their news cycle going. Eureka market, it might be water wall, I'm not sure. California and then, in Hawaii, it's about 8 o'clock or so out there. It's something where sometimes, folks, they're not exactly sure how to read some of this stuff here because it's so unusual. I'm trying to give you the latest, obviously. Okay, so again, let me check some more data. As we're live on the air. Let's flip the Honolulu gauge. You can see the jump on some of that, getting close to minor flood there on the observed water levels. As we continue to give you guys the very latest here on exactly what's going on with the specific tsunami situation here. We're talking about the Central Pacific with things as we track them here. Again, this is a serious scenario, and the danger is there to some degree. Maybe it's not, this the overwhelming one, but even 10 feet would be a real big problem for these folks. So you got to take that very seriously. And the evacuation order to be in play. The threat really commencing there. It seems starting about 50 minutes ago at this point. at about 17 past the last hour is when that concern was really expected to start to mount, and that the preps and everybody out of the way, that needed to happen by 17 past 7 there Hawaii time. So again, as we continue to give you guys the very latest, that's the gauge in Honolulu. As we just need to be continuing to track this here, obviously, these wee hours of the morning. Let me go ahead and keep checking things here. Just bear with me. Honestly, an urgent situation here. I'm in California, Crescent City, California as well. So again, I'm just continuing to give you guys the very latest. Of course, we're talking about 10 feet. That'd be really bad if that happens. In California, some of these areas, the northern parts of the state, let me go back to this, could be 5 feet. Humboldt, Del Norte counties, coastal zone, especially up toward Crescent City, that's where the concern with the topography is definitely the highest here because of the geography here, topography. This water can kind of come on in here, really cause problems. Apparently, according to Brian Norcross, looking at some of their covered up Fox weather earlier on, he's talking about 2011, the tsunami in Japan. This is an area here on the west coast that had some big damage. Nothing like Japan, but there were some big problems here from that. You can kind of see how things funnel the water on in toward this area here. I know it's something. It's didn't like severe weather or hurricanes that we're used to talking about. So I'm going to kind of cite some other sources. Normally, kind of know what to talk about here. This is a little bit, on the edge of meteorology here, but it's something that is very urgent here and does have some meteorological connections for sure. So again, but you see how the water is kind of, easier to be higher level here because of the way it's like a catcher's mitt, kind of like Cedar Key in some ways. And that's how it's been so vulnerable from storm surge from our hurricanes there the last couple of years locally, like Adalia and Helene, obviously. So again, it's something to kind of be mindful of. And we're looking in California, not Florida. We have a Crescent City in Florida that's near some water, not the coast. But this is California. We're talking about a tsunami warning that is in effect right now. So again, parts of the zone there under this, are areas there in Northern California, the coastal zone there, parts of Del Norte, and parts of Humboldt counties. So, technically, Eureka's under this warning. I changed the color a little because it was blending in so much with some of the others, but it's still kind of hard to see the difference between that and the advisory north and south, where there still could be problems. But, we still got to be, watching there. But the worst danger is right up in here for the continental U.S., 48 states. If we had one in parts of Alaska as well, and you see the advisory in these other colors here as we look even up in here, north of Seattle, we have the advisory, some water rise, right at the beach. You don't want to be on the beach. You don't want to be right at the water because that could still be deadly, sweep you over your feet, especially with it being dark. But and I got to switch this over to see more of the alerts, so don't take that as this, all clear if you're not under it. It's just a geography thing, but with our system. But just don't be near the water. As you're looking toward the goldish color, the red is more concerning. We really got to evacuate. But back to this color here, San Fran. Turn the radar off. You see San Fran, there's definitely don't be near the water there because it could rise doing knock you off your feet there. If you had a foot of water come in, the 6 inches could flowing water can knock you down. San Luis Obispo, of course. If we get further down, Santa Barbara, Oxnard. It's not a warning or a watch. Watch means possible. Warning means really concerning. Advisory is kind of, it's going to happen, but it shouldn't be overwhelming. We have that Oxnard, there toward Long Beach, as we get in here, Huntington Beach and San Clemente and Oceanside and San Diego, Chula Vista, Imperial Beach, and the like. So, again, advisory there, a lot different than a warning like what we have there in toward parts of Northern California, though. Up in toward here, that is for sure. Where you see that reddish color that I have in here. Especially right in here where we could have 5 feet of inundation. That's not good. So, again, as we look toward like Crescent City in California, and the timeline on that, you have about 40 minutes, okay? 2:50 Eastern, 11:50 Pacific time, when the first waves could arrive there around Crescent City, California. You know, that's where the greatest danger could lie. We could have some major damage in that zone right in here. So do not, be near the water. And in fact, if you're near the warning, you really got to just evacuate. Whether it's vertically or inland, to higher ground, one way or another, get to higher ground in these areas. So, as we continue to give you guys the very latest here, let me see if there's any questions or comments from any of the viewers at home. I just thanks so much for tuning in and trusting me. We get back to our other graphic here. Normally we have a normal update. Right now, instead, we're covering the big worldwide story. The tsunami warnings in play for parts of Alaska, the Lucent Islands there, California, parts of down north, Humboldt counties, Crescent City, California, and then the Hawaii coastal zones, all those zones there. And, with that threat out in toward the Central Pacific. Already arrived in Alaska, already arrived some in Hawaii, but the threat still could mount there. And then California, Crescent City, California, within the hour could have the danger started to escalate there. Could be up to 5 feet there, up to 10 feet in Hawaii. Check on social media here. And again, trying to give you the latest. There's sunset there in Hawaii now. It's going to make it harder to see things. Again, trying to give you the latest on everything that's going on with this situation. A very serious one for sure, as we continue to keep you guys up to date. I'm meteorologist Casey Cloud here in the Weather Center. Again, talking about these different numbers here. So concerning, obviously. Okay, so let me see what else we can pull up. I think we should go ahead and pull up some satellite information out there. This, gonna have a tsunami, whether it's larger or smaller, probably smaller, but still could be impactful. It's gonna keep pushing down here, and got a couple tropical cyclones to the south. It's something you don't really ever see out here as you're looking toward parts of Hawaii. You have a couple tropical cyclones here on the view. The interaction of that and whatever waves or from that, I don't know how that's going to impact folks, downstream there. I mean, that's not necessarily a look here geographically. I mean, that's more Mexico and maybe Central America would impact or change. I don't know if it would have that big of an impact because he's going around these islands. You think that'd have a bigger impact maybe than a tropical cyclone, but still interesting nonetheless here. I say tropical cyclone, it's plural. We have 2 down there. Yeah, they're not going to hit Hawaii. The winds may be a little bit stronger there, and been a little bit more fire concern lately. I know we had all that from, going back with Dora and the fire concern a few years ago. Hawaii, all those fatalities, and don't want to repeat that. This was different here, in that we have a situation where the focus right now is more about tsunami concern. But you see, to the north Cali, to the south, it's Iona, Hurricane Iona. And then there's Hawaii right there. We have the tsunami warning of that. So, again, we're still with you guys, trying to keep you guys up to date here Let me see the current temperature data just to kind of set the scene a little bit better, since there's not a lot of other stuff to put on that graphic. It's pretty nice temperature action there, but people never been to the beach because of this danger. There were threats of arrest even in some areas because of this danger. You know, folks told they had 10 minutes to get out of there, get arrested. So, gotta take things seriously, obviously. Again, trying to give you the latest. Trying to keep you informed. Let me go ahead and see what else we can kind of pull up here. Bear with me. Let's see if we can put some more gauges on in. Some of that latest data. Let me see if I got any power outage maps. Because, you know, could have a few of those. I mean, even just accidents because of people evacuating. Only 85 customers in the dark there in Hawaii right now. That's great news so far. There have been accidents that were reported by local media. There, KHON TV reporting some accidents earlier on when I was watching some of their coverage in the Honolulu region. So many people trying to get out, and you know, people getting, you know, maybe anxious there, and then just the gridlock causing issues, and then, you know, hopefully the accidents were as minor as they could have been. But as we go ahead and look here at the Honolulu gauge, you see that spike there. Definitely a sign of a tsunami, even if that's not. Luckily, this isn't like some big notch upward into the, you know, like what we saw toward the hill country, the Texas hill country back in, you know, earlier part of this month. That all the fatalities, not that type of spike, thankfully. You know, this is indicative of a tsunami, but, you know, it could be something just horrific if it was a big spike like a needle all the way across here. You know, that'd be terrible. It's not seeing that, thankfully, right now, which is great news as we're continuing to give you guys the very latest on this ongoing situation. So, again, trying to keep you guys informed here. Trying to keep you guys informed, at least. You know, this is not something that's impacting the local area, but this is still a big deal here as we're looking toward the global picture, toward western parts of the continental U.S., toward, you know, we have a small sliver of Guam, under that tsunami advisory at the last check there. That's a cause for concern as well. So we just gotta, you know, be mindful here. Even if it's not impacting our area, that's, you know, the great news, but this is still a big deal. So what we're gonna do right now, we're at 19 past 2 o'clock Eastern. We're gonna take about a 10-minute break, gather more information, and be back here at the bottom of the hour at about 30 past. So that's 2:30 Eastern, 11:30 Pacific. 20 minutes from the impact, potentially in Crescent City, California, and then 8:30 Hawaii time. So again, we're just continuing to give you guys the latest, the numbers there. You know, not overwhelming, but definitely still cause for concern. There's a tsunami, whether it's a major or minor impact, it's still a tsunami impact here for sure. We're watching Hawaii, we're watching California with a tsunami warning in effect there for parts of Humboldt and Del Norte counties. So we're going to keep you up to date and be back in more about 10 minutes. We're going to gather the latest details, catch our breath. So it's a one-man band, fluid situation. We're going to have more 30 minutes left before the impact really start to take hold in that Crescent City, California area, Del Norte County. So make sure you're evacuating there. Have that tsunami warning areas in Humboldt County as well. So serious situation. We're going to gather information here, gather more details, back with the latest updates here shortly.
This is a clouds weather alert.
Meteorologist Casey Cloud back with the tsunami coverage here at the bottom of the hour. We still have the tsunami warning toward Hawaii, and we have had some tsunami action toward Alaska. Tsunami warning also parts here Northern California, Crescent City, California. The tsunami waves could start here 20 minutes or so west of the U.S. West Coast under an advisory, but that couple county area were more vulnerable, especially around Crescent City County or Crescent City and Del Norte County, are really concerning here with the tsunami danger coming on in here. Got 20 minutes here left. I mean, time's running short in toward that area for sure as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things. I know fluid situation is a one-man band here, but we're getting some of the data in. Let me give you the latest statement from, now there's an office in Honolulu that deals with the tsunami danger for them, further out in Central Pacific, but then an office in Alaska for Alaska, the west coast of the U.S. And they sent out an update here that I want to pull up. So this is from 11:20 Pacific, so about 10 minutes ago. Still a tsunami warning for California, the coast from Cape Mendocino to the Oregon-California border. As we're looking there, this includes areas there, in toward like down north and Humboldt counties, and then an advisory for California as we're looking there from the border with Mexico and all the way there to the area that switches over to the warning. San Fran Bay under an advisory, all California other than that area from Cape Mendocino to the Oregon-California border is advisory. So advisory for the coastal areas there in the state, except for one spot, that's under the warning. Then we have Oregon, that coast under a tsunami warning, Washington coast under a tsunami, or let me back it up. I'm sorry, I know we're not used to talking about this. So, okay, so let's back it up. It's a warning, which is really bad, parts of California. The rest of the U.S. West Coast is an advisory. I'm trying to break it down, but, we've been on for a while, and this situation that's fluid, not used to talking about this. It's an advisory, not as bad as a warning. It's to evacuate the beaches pretty much for the rest of California. Other than that, couple county zone. Same with Washington State and Oregon, British Columbia. We see some of the other parts of the, zones outside the U.S. with some alerts, but we're focused on the U.S. Washington, Oregon, California. Other than those two, counties, pretty much those coastal zones and those two counties down north and Humboldt, it's about evacuating the beaches. Down north and Humboldt, especially on Crescent City, California, it's about, more than that. It's about, maybe 5 feet of inundation coming on in. So advisory for U.S. West Coast other than those couple counties. But let's go ahead and see the times of arrival. This is very important. So let's see, what time do we have? 2 minutes maybe from coming in to Port Orford there in Oregon. A little bit longer, and that's only 1 to 2 feet. Could last on and off here with the fluctuations and the levels here with the tsunami waves, smaller ones, 1 to 2 feet, maybe 15 hours. That's coming on in, an advisory there. Don't be on the beach. It's coming in now. That potential for some issues. Brookings, Oregon, about a foot there. And then you see in Washington State, you see the timeline. So 2335 is like 1 minute from now. Okay, so, but some of these areas are less than a foot as you look, but then you see a little over a foot there. Around, if I'm mispronouncing that, I apologize, with the Mo Clips community there. Then you have in California, most of the areas there under a foot, like Santa Barbara, so some fluctuations about an hour and over from now. La Jolla, California there, about an hour and a half, give or take 4:10 Eastern, 1:10 Pacific, less than a foot. But the problem is, you see, Port San Luis could be almost 4 feet, but then we had the tsunami warning, the highest concern, it could arrive in about 15 minutes. Crescent City could be up to 5 feet and last, with it fluctuating for 30 hours. So it's, a localized storyline that's significant for them for sure. As we're looking at things, we're really concerned about that area, Crescent City, California. I mean, it's not something maybe we have talked about much in meteorology before about, or in the country, other than, 2011 tsunami, they had problems there as well because of, what happened. It was one we had Japan, devastation, still some problems there. This, here could be up to 5 feet in that Crescent City, California area, and the onset could be in 15 minutes. So this is time to evacuate. If you haven't already, you got to evacuate either vertically or inland, one or the other. want to see vertically, at least get to that fourth floor if you're in a high rise. I don't know that they would actually have something like that there like they do in Hawaii, but I've never been to Crescent City, California, anything like that. But my point is a situation here where we're just wanting to get you above, where maybe 5 feet of tsunami wave action could be. So that you don't drown, and the 6 inches of water can knock you off your feet. So again, we're just trying to give you guys the very latest here on this situation. Again, maybe 5-foot tsunami wave, worst case there for Crescent City, 5 feet above ground level, coming in about 15 minutes or so. It's about an hour up to 4 feet around Port San Luis, California. So about an hour away from you guys there. So, of course, when you have less than a foot, that's more about just being off the beach. It is dark anyway, so it makes it a little harder. This little fluctuation, the 6 inches of flowing water can knock you down. So that's something to be mindful of here for sure. You see Fort Bragg starting in about 15 minutes. It could be a little over a foot there as we're looking in northern parts of California. So again, just trying to give you guys the latest here. Give you guys the latest from the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center data there in, I guess Pacific would be in Honolulu. This would be the National Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska here. This is stuff we're not used to talking about, obviously. Thankfully, it's not something that happens that often. But when it does happen, we got to take it seriously when we have the warning, not just an advisory or what, but actual warnings in play for parts of the U.S. Even, a couple counties, California, coastal zones there, at least parts of those counties, and then out toward Hawaii. So again, this is what we're down with right now. Let me go ahead and move away from this graphic here. You can kind of see what we're down with on this graphic with that warning there. Let me go ahead and jump back to our Honolulu/Hawaii view of things here. I know the temperatures are nice, but so many folks having to evacuate. They've been stuck in traffic and the like here. Could have up to 10 feet there based on the forecast that we've been looking at. Not 50 feet, not 100 feet, thankfully, but 10 feet can still be deadly, obviously. You still got to take it very seriously. So again, let me see what else we have here. I'm going to try to pull up some more gauges here, inundation gauges here on the dashboard. Okay, so let's pull up some of these in toward Oahu. Give me just a couple more seconds. Just a one-man band. Bear with me. I apologize. Stuff we're not used to talking about, but it's very important to talk about. As you see here, toward parts of Hawaii, you see how I've had that jump, and it's kind of fallen back down a little bit here. That's not overwhelming, not even a minor flood officially, but even just a little surge of water can still knock you off your feet if you're right at the beach, obviously. Depending on how this goes when you get a minor flood, I would kind of think that'd be starting to get on like some of those roads there right at the coast. But, that's kind of how it probably around here when you're looking at it. But out there, I don't know if they'd define it that way. I would think they would, but as we continue to look at things here, that's more. Ooh, that's way more impressive there. As we're looking closer out there toward some of these other areas, that's not what you want to see there. Obviously, Maui County there. That's more concerning. That's the worst we've seen by far. We were talking about 10 feet, and it went down, the water receded, and it poured back in. That's 5 feet. That's much worse here, folks. And we're seeing out toward Maui County. So, that could be the different geographic effects of where they had the wildfire. I don't know if that had any impact right at the coast that's coming up in. But, not 10 feet, but 5 feet is still really bad. And that's going to cause some significant damage, even to some maybe homes there right along the coast, I would think. Depending on how everything's kind of structured here, that's, that's toward our area, like the Gulf Coast, that's a strong tropical storm, low-end hurricane type of storm surge, comparatively impact. It's not the same thing, but that's, significant here. That's a much more serious situation there toward parts of Maui County than, and they had all these terrible wildfires, out there. We talk about Lahaina for so long there. So serious, it very much so justified. Still needs to be talked about. People still trying to recover. So many fatalities out there, and You see, as we're looking here at 5 feet, that's not good. As we're looking toward that area for sure. As we look at some of these other numbers, seeing some jumps in, on Oahu there in Honolulu County, but not like what we saw in Maui County. Then the Big Island, they're having some jumps there. About an inch, a foot and a half, getting the minor flood there. Again, taking things seriously, obviously, as we're looking at things, as we're tracking them. Just trying to give you an idea of some of these little jumps here on the gauges. It's all about protecting you, your friends, and your family here this morning. Again, looking at the situation, obviously, much more severe based on that one initial indication out there where Maui County, that surge there of water seemingly more significant for sure out in toward those, zones there. So not what you want to see. Not overwhelming like, Japan in 2011, but still could be deadly. As we look back there, I'm going to check social media for more updates, obviously, as we try to give you guys the very latest information to protect you, your friends, and your family. Just checking for the latest here. I know we don't normally have to do OIS, but it's, after an 8.8 earthquake, it's so serious. I was off there of Russia, the 8.8 earthquake. Again, just checking the different sources. Okay, so still trying to keep you up to date. Let me go ahead and go back to the other map. Again, the concern seems to be toward Maui County, where we had that big jump here on the gauge. I know that doesn't do it justice. Let me move that over and move that up a little if we can. It's hard to get to the exact spot. You have to move your mouse just in the precise spot. I might not even be able to do it. I know some of these gauges you can adjust, like on the hydrology site, but okay, I'm trying. It's about 4 or 5 feet. So just take my word for it. You can come on the scale. As we go ahead and look, that's a needle type jump. Not overwhelming like what we had toward the Texas Hill Country earlier this month with the flooding, but this is still bad. Could be deadly. 5 feet of flowing water, the problem. And we just had that there toward, and I'm going to try to pronounce this there, Kealuni Harbor there, if I'm pronouncing that right, or Kealuni Harbor. As we're looking there in the worst parts of Hawaii, that inundation, that, surge, that tsunami that we're talking about here, so significant. The threat, could have been way worse than this, but it still could be pretty bad here as we're looking toward that area. So again, that's the storyline at 8:44 p.m. Hawaii time out there toward the Central Pacific as we continue to give you guys the very latest on exactly what is happening here as we look at the latest data here. A big deal, obviously. So let me go ahead and let's see what else we might have here. Check some more sources. Bear with me here. It's all about protecting you, your friends, your family. Of course, we're lucky. We're lucky at, locally, but there could still be tourists from our area out there. Of course, we covered normally in North Florida, South Georgia, as we're looking at things, as we're tracking things here. But our focus is out there toward the Pacific tonight after that 8.8 earthquake that struck off of Russia. 8.8 magnitude earthquake, a big problem, obviously. Let me go ahead and continue to give you the latest. Again, still checking all my different sources. Very fluid situation, obviously. It's a one-man band. That's why I'm looking down like this so much. Again, still trying to give you the latest here on this ongoing situation. Just checking things here. Again, still with you. Let's go to that inundation map again. The Roy graph. Continuing to get more updates. So you see that big jump there, obviously, into Ward Maui County. And that's obviously really concerning. Not, just catastrophic, but still a big deal. 5 feet, still a big deal, obviously, as we're looking and as we're tracking things here this morning or this evening, depending on where you're watching from. So, a serious situation for those folks in Hawaii as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things here. The latest data continuing to come on in. That's a noteworthy type of situation. Let me go ahead and jump back on over to some other views. Bear with me. Let's go to California again. In just a handful of minutes, that Crescent City, California area and down North County could start to see the tsunami conditions come in there, and they could get 5 feet. Forecast for Hawaii up to 10, here up about 5. And it's a situation where, if they had 5 out there so far, maybe they get, maybe they only get 2 or 3 here, but it could still be 5. And that could still be a pretty big deal and cause some damage. So, time running out there in that area around Crescent City, in toward that zone. It's pretty much go time. If you haven't done so already, really earlier on was go time. Really, it's just got to be getting to that higher ground here now, where it's all about. And toward Crescent City, California. The estimates are 2 minutes from now, but it could already be coming in on them some. The first tsunami action, which could last on and off over about a day or so, 30 hours is what they said there with the tsunami information. So this is some really serious stuff there, out there. The way this is oriented geographically, some of that water could be at more vulnerable spots here. These spots could have some pretty big damage here as we're looking ahead in toward the timeline. Again, tsunami warning continues there. Impacts to be about to begin there in North Crescent City, California. And other parts of down north and Humboldt County, the other parts of the coast may be already getting some tsunami conditions, but right there where I was pointing looks to be where the concern is the greatest in the continental lower 48 here in the United States. So we're going to keep you advised here. Again, time is about 50 past the hour of the impact. That's when the forecast said it would start to come in. So, big problem there for that area in down north county. Crescent City, California. The tsunami action could be underway about right now. So make sure, if you haven't already taken precautions, it's pretty much down to no time left. You got to run almost to try to get to higher ground at this point as you're trying to, maybe it's just about, getting, Roy in that worst spot there right to the coast. You can't be right at the coast. You can't be on the beach. Some of these areas is an advisory. This is a warning. That means you really need to be, at least 5 feet up. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but, you can't be, you got to be getting to higher ground. If you have a tall building, you want to at least be on the 2nd story there. Really the 4th story is what the recommendations were in Hawaii. I don't know if you have that many story type of buildings out here, out there in or that part of the country. So, with so little time left, it's just about fleeing from the water here the best you can to protect yourself at this point in time. Gonna be back with more in about 10 minutes. It's 50 past, 2 Eastern time, 50 past 11, that, 0 point there in the timeline in Crescent City, California. It's 8:50 Hawaii time where they have a tsunami. Having, especially where the impacts were Maui County, maybe 5 feet there toward parts of Maui County, give or take, based on the gauges we were looking at. So please continue to take this situation seriously. We'll have more in about 10 minutes. Keep it tuned to Cloud Weather. I'll keep you guys up to date. Stay tuned, stay safe.
This is a clouds weather alert.
Meteorologist Casey Cloud back here at the top of the hour. It's midnight Pacific time. We still have that tsunami warning there toward Crescent City, California, Delaware County, and with a couple counties here toward that western U.S. coast. We have this threat continuing, so we hope you guys evacuated there. Of course, we have a tsunami warning toward Hawaii as well, prompted by the 8.8 earthquake there off of Russell on that Tuesday there as we were looking at things. As we were tracking things here, a big storyline, obviously, and we're still trying to give you guys the very latest on this fluid scenario. Let me go ahead and see if we can give you some more gauge data. I know that area in Maui County was especially concerning because we were not just getting like a foot or a few feet, but at least 5 feet, if not higher, of storm surge / in this case, obviously, tsunami impact. So let me go ahead and go to the gauge data there in Hawaii. We're going to go ahead and show you what we're talking about. Let me go ahead and show this to you guys. You can see here on our other source. Let me go ahead and punch that on up. As we're looking out toward the Central Pacific now, you can see the situation here. You see that needle-like, surge here. Not a good thing, obviously indicating the water height. It went down several feet. That's how you have it. The water will go out in the tsunami, then the water went up several feet, and that's obviously a bad sign. And that water coming on in, causing problems in some of these coastal communities here this morning or out there this evening, obviously, as we're tracking things, this specific tsunami. So, a very serious scenario, obviously, in the north parts of Hawaii. With this tsunami warning in effect, and if we have these tsunamis, don't think just one wave and then it's done. This could last on and off for hours and hours here. I won't stick with it for hours and hours, but you've been warned. You just gotta until the tsunami warnings get dropped. For sure, you gotta stay out of these areas that have evacuated here. Advisory is kind of something where you still gotta stay off the beach, and there could still be cleanup to be doing in the aftermath. But tsunami warning, obviously, until that's dropped, you can't be getting back into these areas. It's too dangerous, and it could be even higher water levels even after the initial onslaught here. So, again, you got to take this very seriously, obviously, in this scenario, as we're tracking things, as we're monitoring things here, water going out and coming back in, and it could be worse. Let's go ahead and get toward the west coast here and look at toward that Crescent City, California area. Starting to, watch maybe some numbers go up now. Is that out of the ordinary? I don't know. It doesn't really look like anything too crazy here as we've been watching. I mean, as you're looking now, as we're looking now, I mean, it looks like it's a little bit up, but maybe at a lower point here in the tide cycle, then it could start to surge up here toward minor flooding or even something more than that. 5 feet, maybe more than just minor flooding here, obviously, toward Crescent City, California, and that's what the forecast indicates they could reach there and or down North County. So again, continue to track this here very carefully as we're looking towards some of these different areas out there in toward the United States, whether it's the mainland or if we get out toward parts of the Central Pacific. So again, we're just trying to give you guys the very latest to keep you advised here on this big threat, obviously, that's going on. Let me just go ahead and look at some more of my sources here, if there's any new information coming on in. As the moments tick by, obviously, we're very interested in all the different data points that, are coming on out. There's big fire concern out toward northwestern parts of the U.S. coming up. Maybe not right at those coastal areas, but it's interesting to see that fire outlook come out for that Wednesday. As I go ahead and look here at some more information. Just trying to keep you guys up to date, obviously. Having a look on some of the different platforms for the latest updates. Again, it's very fluid, obviously, what we're dealing with. Let's look back out toward the Central Pacific again. Of course, we've been watching the Aleutian Islands in Alaska as well. with the tsunami situation. Even after we go off, we could have tsunami warnings, probably still will. Some of these areas, even, if you've had a onslaught in Italy, it could still get worse before, it gets better. So keep that in mind, obviously, as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things here. So you see some of these numbers in Hawaii. Some of these areas not so bad, but the topography toward Maui County seemingly helping to funnel that water in. See some of this in toward Oahu here, but the bigger concern. I'll look a little more on Oahu. See some of these jumps, but Maui County a bigger concern, obviously, much bigger, as you'll see on this gauge. About 5 feet. I mean, went out 5 feet, went up 5 feet. Could it get even worse than that's the question? That's not a good thing, though. Maui County's had the wildfires, some of these areas going back a couple years. So they do not need this, here for sure. It could be, this could be a little worse because of the wildfire. I'm not sure the topography exactly where they were there. Maybe not been right at this spot, but still not good for that zone there, that county, for sure. That may be getting hardest hit here in the U.S. from the tsunami after having all those wildfires. The anniversary pretty much right around now. So not a good set of circumstances whatsoever as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things here in toward the weather center. So just trying to keep you guys up to date here on all this. It's very late out in the east, 3:07 a.m. It's midnight, out in the west coast region there, 12:07. It is a 9:07 p.m. Hawaii time. And we're still watching. Folks are out of their homes or displaced tonight, out of their, hotel rooms and the like. I'm sure, they're hoping they can get back. They might not be able to get back tonight. That could start to become an issue. I don't know if people will sleep in their car. I don't know what the rules are even on that. Further in, this could start to become a prolonged thing if the threat lasts for another 24 hours on and off. We shall see towards some of these different areas. But that's why we've had these tsunami warnings in play. The concern has been there, obviously, as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things here in the overall meteorological picture. So again, this is a big deal here, obviously, as we're looking toward, the Eastern Pacific, the Central Pacific here with the tsunami threat. We're just been trying to keep you guys up to date on what's going on. I'm going to keep checking social media here to see what we might have. I know, we're just trying to keep you informed on what's going on here for sure. And we're on all the different platforms, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, keeping you guys up to date. YouTube at Clouds Weather, for instance. And I'm just going through everything here. Eventually, if it becomes more prolonged, it'll still be a big story, but it becomes more of a story covered by the locals out there, hyper local level, but still could be worsen before it gets better. Don't let your guard down, stay evacuated. Whether it's higher up or further inland. One of the U.S. West Coast teams will continue maybe to deteriorate some more as we look ahead. So I have to be mindful of that here, obviously. Hawaii, you see some of these different jumps here, obviously, in the specific tsunami situation. So very concerning, obviously, for these folks out there. Some concern, especially in Northern California, other parts of the coast, got to be real careful, but Northern California, some enhanced concern as well as we're looking toward Crescent City, where folks have evacuated, obviously, there. As we'll go back up and look at the gauge up in that area as we look here geographically. Can't really see a whole bunch there out of the ordinary. Let's see here. I'll check. Let's go to the gauge just a little south. I mean, nothing overwhelmingly obvious right now. Some of these units having advisories to be even less apparent, possibly. As we're looking at things, as we're tracking things. As we get back out here. See some different fluctuations toward Oahu. There's Maui County here. Let me go ahead and throw that up. That's obviously where the concern's been higher. 5 feet or so. It's, going down 5, then up 5, so it's a 10-foot difference, but it's like 5 feet above ground level out there. You see the predictions are going to take into account a tsunami, obviously, as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things. So, again, so a very serious situation, obviously, out there as the situation does continue. I know if this was like a hurricane, we could leave the radar up a little while longer, as we start. It's still a big deal, but, with this, I almost feel like I confuse people, but just leave a alert map up, and there's not a lot of context, so we're probably going to keep it going a little longer here and then wrap things unless I get a big surge here in terms of, some of these numbers really going up or of information. So, on some other stuff that we're not able to see the data on. So, again, it's a very fluid scenario. Obviously, you got to still take it seriously here. It's not a local story for us, in our area, but it's a local story for folks like in the Eureka, California TV market, obviously Honolulu, Hawaii, and even in the Alaska TV markets, that, the area that covered there, the station market that covered. I'm not sure which one it is. There's like Fairbanks, Anchorage, might just even Anchorage in the state at this point, consolidation of TV station groups and the like. But, Lucent Island still a threat out there as we're looking and as we're tracking things here in the overall picture. So, again, different local markets covering the threat here on these local levels. Again, a very big deal, obviously, with the tsunami threat, but it's not like the Japan one in 2011, where we had, just astronomical waves, or like the let's try that again, the Indonesian one there back in 2004. So, I know that there is out there all those concerns for sure, as we're looking there out toward the different, areas of the oceans here along, the globe here per se. So, again, trying to give you guys the very latest here on this scenario, trying to keep you guys up to date. Still a big deal. Things could still get worse before they get better. In some of these areas, they might get better for a few minutes and then get worse than they've been the whole way along. So let's go ahead and take this gauge again. Definitely in a minor flood, even just 6 inches of flowing water can knock you down. Something to very much take into consideration as we look at things. Let's look back at the gauge for the west, for the north here. Keep going. You see out here the Midway Islands that kind of give us an indicator of something coming. And you see how it was up there in the minor flood, the Midway Islands area in the ocean there, the Pacific. Let's look down here. This would be American Samoa. I believe there's a tsunami advisory for them down there. The tracking things as we're monitoring things. Obviously, I know there was an alert for Australia at one point. I don't know if there still is, but looking out here, Marshall Islands, like some squiggly lines there. A part of Guam was under advisory as we're looking at things. There's part of Guam now. Let's get further south there. That's a little bit further north of those sensors, but you see some jump. I don't know if that was from anything. Right now, the current time is some squiggly lines. There may be some impacts from it. And on the left there, out toward Guam, as we look out there. Let's go ahead and jump back north. Let's look to the Aleutian Islands and Alaska. See some of these jumps. We've had a foot or more in some spots there with the tsunami. Want to call it storm surge. It's kind of, some similarities for sure. You see some of these different numbers in Hawaii here. Definitely noteworthy in toward Maui County. I mean, as a tsunami accident goes around the islands, but other areas could start to see some higher numbers here as well. We shall see. Still have our alert in toward California as well. Let me pull up the graphics. I mean, you see, if you have, 5 feet what we've had in toward Maui, maybe a little bit more, Maui County, and you see that's over some people's heads. More than that over everybody's head, and That's a big problem. Even if 6 inches of flowing water can knock it down, or even have this a tsunami advisory in play. So you got to take that into account here for sure as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things. You know, it could be up to 10 feet in Hawaii. So the forecast has been, and some of these some of these numbers are going to fluctuate to 5 feet toward Crescent City in California. So that's a pretty big deal. Obviously, it can be deadly as well. Even if you're right at the coast and it's an advisory, you have just 6 inches or a foot of a tsunami, that can be deadly because, you know, you have rip currents that can be deadly. It's a similar principle in some ways here in toward, you know, the oceans here of Earth. So, again, just continuing to keep you guys advised here on things. Again, storm surge is very similar, but not the same, you know, as tsunami heights. I mean, you know, with tsunami, you know, we've had like the flood in Texas, 20 feet, you know, hill country there. That's similar to storm surge. With tsunami, you can have, we've seen maybe 5 feet, 10 feet possible still. You know, you can have much worse though. You know, you can't really be hard with storm surge or river flood. And I would say to have 90 feet or over 100 feet, but you can have that in a harsh tsunami. As we were talking about Japan and Indonesia there, 2011, 2004. So, again, just trying to give you guys the very latest here as we're looking at things and as we're tracking things, obviously. Again, just trying to keep you up to date here as we're live on the air right now. Just trying to keep you informed on the ongoing scenario. Just checking some more things here. Right around Christmas there in 04, so bad in the Indian Ocean with that. You know, toward Indonesia. I mean, the height on that, let me just check that real quick. Talking about over 200,000 fatalities there, and it's unfathomable. Some areas maybe 167 feet there in the Indonesian tsunami out there. So it's obviously just, you know, unfathomable compared to even what we're talking about here, which, you know, it's still a big deal, could still be deadly, but relatively minor in comparison based on what we're seeing. Even though the earthquake number is pretty similar to slightly less than some of these others. 8.8, though, at first it was, you know, thought to have been an 8 magnitude 8 earthquake, but then it was reclassified 8.7 and 8.8, and that ups the ante with the tsunami potential, and then you try to figure out how, you know, shallow or, you know, the depth of the earthquake here, that plays a role as well. So definitely had a tsunami, definitely having a tsunami in the U.S., but is it one for the record books? Well, you know, it could be a big deal, but it's not a historic one, you know, compared to 04, 11, as we're looking and as we're tracking things, but it could still be deadly for some Americans here, obviously, which is still a big deal. You know, in the grand scheme of things, you got to be taking it very seriously. So, again, just trying to keep you guys up to date here on this. You know, we're trying to look at all the different maps. Tsunami warning still parts of the U.S. mainland for, you know, the continental lower 48 is 2 counties, parts of 2 counties down Northern Humboldt. But especially where that vulnerable zone is around Crescent City, California, could have 5 feet of surge coming on in. And I say surge, but really tsunami wave height, the top, you know, highest potential there. We're so used to talking about storm surge, but it's similar. You know, talking about all our hurricanes we've had around our local area recently in North Florida, South Georgia. So again, just trying to keep you up to date. I know you can look at the tides and currents there, tides and currents. .noaa.gov and get the Indonesian dashboard over there. Keep an eye on some of these gauges here, obviously, as we're looking, as we're tracking, even when we're off the air. You know, Crescent City, California, we're going to be watching those folks there, obviously. Could still be pretty nasty for them. And toward down North County, I'm still concerned, you know. This could, you know, the threat could last here for another day or so, even though the initial wave action's just getting going. You know, that's a big deal for that community there in toward northern part of California, the western continental U.S. Your local areas could still have big problems, obviously. But some areas, broad view is not this catastrophic. That's the good news for the U.S. That is for sure. So let me just kind of recap some more things, and I think it'll be time to wrap it. Of course, we can pop back in if something changes, or we have like another earthquake. If we somehow had a one worse that triggered even a worse tsunami situation, that's not, completely impossible, but it's pretty unlikely to follow up a top 10 earthquake of all time with one that's even stronger. But we'll watch for it, obviously, as we're looking at things, as we're tracking things. Let me go ahead and show you where that earthquake was that started this all off on the USGS information here. You can see that blue dot there on the map, right off of Russ, an 8.8 earthquake. Magnitude 8.8 earthquake around 7:25 Eastern time, 1:25 Hawaii time on that Tuesday, and that triggered all this concern. The earthquake was that blue dot up here, the big blue dot. And then you see here down toward Hawaii and then out toward areas of the West Coast. We had all that heightened concern. There's other dots, small earthquakes, but that blue one, so 8.8, which is so significant, one of the top 10, biggest, strongest earthquakes in the history of, the earth here in terms of the record books. But not top 5, I don't believe. And, some of those that triggered the, tsunamis going back, the ones for the record books were, a little bit higher up in general. But 8.8 is still really bad and can, based on the depth and the light, can still be, very, very significant in terms of tsunami production. There's different. It's not just all about the magnitude, it's about the depth and the light, too, that can trigger things. So you got to really be paying attention in that regard. So, we still have tsunami warning for parts of Hawaii, parts of California, the last check parts of Alaska toward the Aleutian Islands as well. So I'll check that just a little bit more out. Tsunami information can be found on some of these sources. Let me go ahead and check it here. Let me check our information at tsunami.gov. Not something that has to thankfully be used very often. We're having to use it a lot tonight. You can keep looking there, even after we're off the air. Don't let your guard down. If you're in a warning, you got to stay evacuated. If you're in an advisory, be very vigilant. Don't be at the beach until until advisory and warning, they're both gone off the board. Don't have any, watch either for whatever reason. If we had something, other triggers down the line, that'd be kind of, something that's not what we're detecting at this point. But as we continue to give you guys the very latest, let me just keep checking things here in our system. It's starting to get wore out, to be quite honest. It's having trouble refreshing our pages here. But again, we're still tracking things. We just got another update. Maybe that's why it's having trouble refreshing. They just sent out something new here. It's the NWS Tsunami Alerts Twitter account. So let's see what we got here. Probably everybody going to that site at once to see the new update. So what do we have? We just got that new detail, in here, the new details. See what they're saying. Tsunami warning remains in effect. Tsunami advisory in effect. So warning still for parts of California, Cape Mendocino, California, the Oregon, California border. Advisories the rest of the U.S. West Coast. That's late. Not East Coast. Okay, nothing to worry about here. But the U.S. West Coast, as we're looking at things, as we're tracking things here. So advisory for the rest of the U.S. West Coast. But those two counties there, on the U.S. West Coast in California, parts of down north, parts of Humboldt, under a tsunami warning, which is a step up from the advisory still. Includes Eureka, includes Crescent City, California, as well. So, okay, the latest forecast there, up to 5 feet could last 30 hours. They're in toward Crescent City, California, on and off. That's significant, obviously. So, U.S. West Coast, continental, tsunami advisory, the couple counties there, tsunami warning. As we've highlighted, as we've talked about, for a while here. Keep you guys up to date. So, still got the warning for parts of Hawaii. Still got the warning. Let's see, did they keep it for the Aleutians? Okay, I think they. Okay, so the Aleutian Islands are now under advisory. Okay, so it's now for. So from what I'm seeing here, the office there in Alaska, Palmer, Alaska, issues for the U.S. West Coast. They were talking about with this, and then Alaska. They dropped the warning for Alaska as an advisory, but California still a warning. the coast from Cape Mendocino, California to the Oregon, California border, and then we also have the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center in Honolulu, keeping the Hawaii area there under a tsunami warning. So, gotta be very mindful of what's going on, obviously, here meteorologically and globally. So, there's a lot to unpack here that we're trying to keep you guys informed on for sure. Let me see what else they might have. Again, tsunami warning, Hawaii, all those zones there near the coast. We're especially concerned about Maui. And then in parts there of California, around Crescent City, California, especially. Alaska is a known advisory from what I'm seeing here on my end, even for the Aleutian Islands. That's what I'm seeing, at least here. You can go to tsunami.gov for more. So let me see if we got anything else here. Bear with me. Again, thanks so much for tuning in and interest in me. Facebook, Casey Cloud Every X, Cloud Weather, Twitter, Sussex at Cloud Casey, YouTube at Cloud Weather, Twitch Cloud Weather, cloudweather.com. You know, giving you all the latest. I know tsunami.gov can keep giving you updates from the, the governmental groups in charge there in Alaska and in Hawaii in charge of giving you the information and everything. We have that tsunami warning there for parts of California, parts of Hawaii continuing. I think we pretty much covered everything we can here, quite honestly. Stay evacuated. If there's no tsunami warning, the advisory, don't be on the beach. And, if it's an area that actually has tsunami, that could still be damaged, that hadn't been cleaned up yet if you're trying to get back. And there still could be smaller, energy pulses there with the wave axe, and that could be dangerous. Think of rip currents here. That's something to be very mindful of. Is that idea for an advisory, maybe a little worse, but tsunami warning could be quite a bit worse, more like a storm surge with a hurricane even. In this situation, not like the ones in the tsunamis in Japan 11 or Indonesia 4, but it could be like some of the tsunamis we've had, that have been a lesser impact, but still dangerous. And kind of like some of the storm surges we've had with some hurricanes here, or on the lower end of some of that, depending on where you're at. It still could be deadly though. Several feet of water coming at you quickly, is a big problem. Just 6 inches of flowing water can knock you down. So, gotta be very mindful of all that here as we're watching, as we're tracking things, as we're giving you guys the very latest. Let me see if there's any questions or comments from any of the viewers here. And it's been a long night. It's even a longer night for folks like in Hawaii and even a couple countries in California, but especially Hawaii, tourists, on a trip. I mean, where are they going to go here tonight is the question in Hawaii, but in a couple countries in California, just getting, away from the coast here, residents, the timeline is, a little later out there even. So where are you going to go is a question as well, which, it's not as many folks probably, but still not a good situation. Any advisory is more about just getting off the immediate beach line. But again, we're still trying to keep you up to date the best we can on things. If we need to pop back, and we will, we'll post stuff obviously here, as needed on Cloud Casey there on Twitter, reposting stuff if necessary. I'm just seeing if there's anything else we can cover here before we wrap. But I know I'm going to go through a bunch of different sources here tonight, more than we normally do. That is for sure in this type of situation. Yeah, see, we have somebody on YouTube watching. They were saying, thank you so much for covering this. And yeah, absolutely. I appreciate everybody tuning in here. I appreciate everybody watching there. Storm Chasing group that are watching on YouTube. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Appreciate everybody tuning in here for this coverage tonight. That's not over here. It's still something we got to be paying attention to. We're giving you the best warning we can, and it's just, this could be a prolonged thing, with at least a tsunami advisory lasting for hours and hours, maybe another day or so with an advisory for some of these areas, with the onset here happening, but it still could be something that's, we've had no threat, but it could be something that kind of extends out here with some of this ongoing danger eventually starting to subside, but it could be damage here as well in the aftermath. Of course, we'll cover our local storms as needed on the different platforms, and be updating you guys on that. The heat, not quite as bad on this Wednesday locally, but on Thursday, we're going to be, maybe not watching the heat as much either, but some storm is still a problem. But, maybe starting to dry out some before we have more rain later on in the period. And of course, we'll be raking in here as needed for local stuff, but our next full updates like Thursday or like Friday, assuming we don't get preempted by something like this, a big deal like a tsunami warning for parts of California, parts of Hawaii, and earlier on, parts of Alaska there toward the Aleutian Islands and the like. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Thank you so much for tuning in and trusting me. I'm meteorologist Casey Cloud. Have a great night. I see AJ watching there on YouTube as well. Appreciate you tuning in as well. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Stay safe. These areas we're so concerned about. Not just something like Indonesia or Japan, but still 5 feet or so, Maui County, and that's been observed. And then, up to 10 still possible there, up to 5 out toward that one part of California, the most vulnerable. Other areas is less than that, mainly a foot, or less for most spots. Not everybody. There's a couple there, a little bit more, but it's an advisory for those in California, Oregon, and Washington, except for that one chunk of California we've been highlighting so much here. That's where it's more about the beach, areas needing to be evacuated versus the whole, area further in a little bit, in the northeast counties and in the ward parts of Hawaii. So that'll do it. It's all about being on that higher ground here. Stay tuned, stay safe, try to have a good night, but I know some folks out of their homes tonight being evacuated because of all this. So everybody, my thoughts and prayers is, concerning Tom, and we just hope everybody gets through this the best they can. Have a great night, everybody, at least the best you can. Stay safe, and we'll be back here as necessary in the hours and days to come.